Welcome back. Today we are joined by Rob McMullen, Trumpet of Patriot's candidate for Senate. Hey Rob, why should the people at home be voting for you in this 2025 election?
People in general or your listenership?
Both, I think. Start more broadly than tailor to our viewers.
Well, I mean, as I've made the point on a lot of other podcasts, by a lot of objective metrics, we are really struggling as a country. I'd even go so far as to say we don't have a functioning society currently. We have the lowest ever birth rates, per capita recession for nearly 2 years now, or 2 years. Home ownership is going to be a dream of the upper class for a lot of the younger generation. And all these things are intertwined. And I think we really need to fix it. I mean, that's my motivation for being involved in politics is I want to see the country doing better. And so I think we have a suite of policies that really address that in a way that the majors don't. That's really the short answer is you look at the policies. So, we are campaigning on an 80% reduction in immigration. Now, there's a lot of gaslighting from, left-wing think tanks like the Australia Institute, for instance. But the reality of supply and demand, the mathematics of it say that if you bring record numbers of people into the country and you're not building enough houses for them, those record numbers of people are going to drive the demand and thus the price for housing up. They're going to put strain on services and infrastructure. And, I think our party, if you look at the way that Clive himself has phrased it and others, they say they destroy communities. We're not afraid of addressing the community angle. It's not all just about economics either. We can't just have record numbers of people coming in and not assimilating, because then they don't assimilate, and then people start feeling like strangers in their own communities. So we're also, another thing is suppressing wages. If you've got more people, especially the low end of the economy, if you've got more people vying for labour jobs, then the price of labour goes down. It's as simple as that. That's basic supply and demand. So we're campaigning on 80% reduction of immigration so that we can restabilise these things. I reference the presentation by Matt Barry. It's called Throw Another Australian on the Barbie, where he makes the argument essentially that because we have below replacement birth rates over time, our housing should be very cheap, because the amount of housing we have over time is going to outstrip our population. So he makes the point in his presentation that the housing crisis is due solely to the record numbers of immigration, and we want to see that fixed. You can watch Clive Palmer's address at the National Press Club, and it spoke to me a lot. It motivated me a lot because he talked very passionately and off the cuff. It's not scripted. It's not the usual political cliches. He's just talking off the cuff. He said, I want Australians to be able to live again. I want us to be able to have housing and live our lives, and for housing to not be this unattainable huge goal and this huge focus of our lives, just have a roof over our heads. I want that for Australians. I've made the point on other shows as well. People don't want to bring up kids just in high rises. They don't want iPad kids. We want a backyard. That's the Australian dream. So I really want to see that Australians return to that, and I want us to be able to have that for everybody. So the other couple of policies that I think are stand out is, and this is a policy in 22, it's back again because I think it is a good policy, is a 15% levy on iron ore exports. Now, Clive, once again, if you watch the handful of times that he's spoken about this, he's spoken about it quite a lot. And he says, China has become a manufacturing world power on the back of Australian iron ore. And we could raise the price on it, and that would still be cheaper than them trying to set up the infrastructure and get it elsewhere. So we'd essentially have them stitched up. Now, I ran the numbers.
Just on that, I want to push back slightly, because recently we have seen intense trade differences between China and Australia after Scott Morrison labelling China as the origin of coronavirus from 2019. Mm-hmm. Most of them have been taken off under the Albanese government. Mm-hmm. Over that time, we've also seen the growth of Indonesia as a nickel export market for China, nickel import market for China, whereas our market for nickel has decreased at the same time. Is there not also that risk of, if we put these, if we up the price of iron ore exports for China by 15%, they won't move away to other countries that can fill that void.
Does Indonesia have the iron ore exports that we do? I mean, you're talking about nickel, so iron ore is a different thing. Does
Not
Indonesia have
just
iron ore?
not specifically Indonesia, but any other country, because we aren't the only country in the world blessed with iron ore.
No, the countries that when we dealt with this in 22 were being referenced was South America and Africa, and so because they're so far away, the costs of establishing the infrastructure to get them from there make it prohibitive, much more than that 15%. I'm not sure about iron ore from Indonesia. You referenced they have nickel, but I don't know if they've got iron ore, and ours is very high quality as well. So that's the argument from the party. I mean, definitely delve into it as much as you like to stress test it. I think that's a great idea. But the argument is that with our proximity to China, their position now as a manufacturing superpower, they need our iron ore, and we could be selling it for 15% more. And then the argument is that we funnel that into paying off our national debt. So when I ran the numbers on this, it was about 130 billion. So 15% was roughly 25 billion a year. Paying off a $1 trillion debt, you're talking about eliminating our national debt in, crude numbers, as assuming that you're not also putting more on the credit card, but 50 years to pay off the national debt. So in real terms, you might have kids, and at the age of 25 or 30, they're going to be trying to have their kids and buy a house. So if your children, my children, are growing up in an economic situation where our national debt is actually half what it is now, and it's halfway to being paid off, I think that is a huge benefit. So I think it is a good policy.
I do agree on the broader rationale behind the policy. It'd be interesting to see the numbers behind it.
Well, when I ran the numbers myself,
Yeah.
I looked at Australia's iron ore exports, about 130 billion. And so it came out with a rough number of 25 billion per year, and then I divided out 1 trillion national debt by that. So paying off the debt in about 50 years, which is probably not bad considering that's quicker than it took to get it there. But the thing that stood out to me too is even in 25 years from now, like I said, I'll say again, our children, or you'll have children, and they'll be in that situation in 25 years of having their own children, hopefully, and trying to buy a house. And so a national debt that's even half what it is now, I think that would be very beneficial. Also notice too that I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there.
And more broadly on this idea of addressing birth rates, home ownership, and wages, this kind of idealized version of going a future where people can own their own homes. Whilst I agree that we should be going for it, there is, if you look at the work of French economist Thomas Piketty, in his book Capital in the 21st Century, he suggests that returns to capital are going to outgrow returns to labour over the long run, and capital is more disproportionately held by the upper classes.
Sorry.
So there's going to be a natural...
I was just throwing that into grok. Does Indonesia have iron ore deposits? They do, however, they're considered very modest.
Okay, fair enough.
Compared to
probably
major
not
producers like Australia or Brazil. So when I mentioned it, South America, that was brought up 3 years ago, is Brazil also having large deposits, but it's a lot harder to get from Brazil to China than it is from Australia to China.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
No worries. So French economist Thomas Piketty, his book Capital in the 21st Century came out, I want to say maybe a little less than a decade ago. And it posits that capital is disproportionately held by the upper classes or the wealthy individuals in society, whereas labour is more disproportionately held by lower classes. And he projects over time, by analysing what's happened historically, that returns to capital are going to outgrow returns to labour. So we're going to see a natural kind of... what am I trying to say? A natural
class stratification.
That's the word.
Yeah.
But there's going to be increased wealth inequality over the long run. And he indicates that we might go back to a Victorian era type of wealth inequality.
Well, we want to stop that. This is one of my, if I had a proper debate with a libertarian, this would be one of the points that I bring up, is that the Pareto distribution is something that happens in nature, that 80% of the returns make their way back to 20% of the people, and that happens in a purely free market as well. As far as I understand it, anyway, that principle still plays out, and so If you notice the difference between us and libertarians is we are not, we are very pro-market, obviously, but, I've been speaking a lot, mention it a lot, we are not opposed to some policies that actually look after and redistribute to Australian families. Unlike the libertarians. And one of the reasons you do that in a functional society is because of that point, is because of this Pareto distribution of the concentration of wealth at the top.
Yeah,
So,
I would agree 100% with you. And it's not only important for wealth redistribution, it's also important for society. Because if you have a few that are consistently getting wealthier and wealthier over time, and the vast majority of people are not seeing those same returns, that's when these left-wing radical ideas can permeate, thoughts
absolutely.
of revolution or
Yes. Yeah.
unionization. And it's
And
just
that,
not stable
yeah.
for society.
No, but that's what has been happening is that as young people, and I've made this point once again, your listeners should all follow me on Twitter because I'm a better writer than I am speaker. But I've made the point too that young people are legitimately being left behind. And I made this point after the 22 election as well, when I had to hit the ground, hit the pavement alongside Greens. And I spent weeks talking to them, is that young people are being left behind, but there is the question of difference becomes and what you do about it. So if you look at the UAP policies and the TOP policies, there are some policies that are investments in young people. Now, I don't agree. And once again, I've gone over this a lot and extensively with my work on natural law. If somebody is interested, I've actually written an essay on the purpose of commons. We talk about where a redistribution and the role it can play. I don't agree in necessarily in direct redistribution for its own sake. I think it has to be a trade. And so a trade might be an investment where they say, okay, we will invest in your education, or we'll invest in certain infrastructure, we'll make the system easy for you to have families and succeed. Whereas the left captures that information, that energy from the left behind young people, and they use it to profit. They say, okay, well, we'll thank you for being our patrons, we're going to look after you, and they sell this mythology. And then they say, well, we're going to use it to tax the billionaires and tax this and tax the middle class. We're going to highlight the middle class because you need this. And it becomes a profiteering exercise for leftist bureaucrats. So I don't agree with that, but I do agree. I also don't agree in a pure market philosophy like the libertarians. I don't think a society is going to function like that. I think a degree of investing in your people will, A, give returns, but also incentivize social cohesion and make people feel like we are a cohesive nation as well. So once again, I'll just say a couple of the policies that we had there. Well, one of them, and it did cause a lot of drama with the libertarians, but we came out saying we could have free university. I spoke to Clive directly about this. I said my concern was free university is sort of funding the Marxist work academics that caused a lot of our problems in the first place, and he agreed. It wasn't for the Australian taxpayers to pay it. He said that if you look at foreign students, they pay 4 times for a degree in America what they pay for a degree in Australia. So we could actually double the international student fees. They'd still be incentivized to come here because it's still cheaper than going to America to get a quality education in a Western nation. And then we could use that money to subsidize education for Australians as well. But then the thing with UAP and once again the TOP policies, you have to look at the entire suite of policies as a cohesive unit, because one of the other policies is that we need to promote Australian values. We say explicitly on the policies on the website we want to get the woke indoctrination out of the schools. So if you actually got the woke indoctrination out of universities and you were incentivizing productive degrees, it's not a bad thing. It's also the reality that for better or worse, a lot of the young people have been baited into expensive degrees and a lot of debt, which is actually hamstringing them. So once again, we go back to one of the things that motivates me, the Australian dream, home ownership, us having families and happy Australian families again. The reality right now is that university debt is one of the things that is really hamstringing young people. The fees have gone up over the last few decades compared to the older generations. And so I am not opposed if other measures are taken to prevent, once again, people falling into that university Marxist trap. I'm not opposed to a bit of a bailout for young people because I think they need it.
I think, that's good having those multiple policies together, because that probably is the biggest gripe people have with that policy is obviously the vast amount of arts degree that teach anti-Australian values. I want to come at it another angle, though. If you make something free, obviously more people are going to use it. Um, but how do you, in that case, let's say there's a hypothetical, everyone goes into a law degree, and there's suddenly an extra 100,000 lawyers in the country. We don't need 100,000 lawyers, and so we'll have a disruptive market effect on lawyers. It will decrease wages for lawyers already in the market. So how do you
Well,
how
I
does the
mean,
policy of the Trumpet Patriots go around oversupply or undersupply of different professions under a free
yeah.
university degree system?
I don't think there's a policy about that specifically. So there has to be a level of this is what we're aiming to do, and you could
Yeah.
follow it to any end point you'd like. But I can give my personal opinion about it. I always try to tell the truth about what's an official policy, or it's just my opinion. I think market philosophy is relevant in the market for the production of goods and services. I think that's where it is relevant. I think we need to have, for want of a better word, investment and a safety net at one end of society. And then I also agree that there are natural monopolies that I think you don't want. Say you don't want a market, you don't want to have to choose between different roads and tolls and energy providers and things that are natural monopolies. I think it's fine for them to be sovereign assets accountable to the sovereign entity of the country, which is the people. But where market philosophy is very relevant is in the market for the production of goods and services. So as lawyers are a service, if you started having a oversupply of lawyers, the price of lawyers would come down, and I don't think that would be a bad thing. And then once that started to get around, I'm pretty sure that would probably correct itself.
Maybe not for the lawyers in the audience. Maybe don't take that to heart. Um, and with your other policies, so we see, especially with Labor, trying to address the issue of university debt by changes to HEX debts, and you see other parties like Rennick and even the LNP to a lesser extent advocating a decrease in immigration. So why should the people at home listening vote for Trumpet of Patriots over those other minor parties who have similar ideas?
There is a lot of overlap. I really hope that people like my vibe as an individual candidate as well. I mean, I've done pods with you guys, I've done pods on the other side and others as well. And I hope people start to get a feel of where I'm coming from. But I also think, so the difference between us and libertarians is just that their market, they're very, I can't think of another word, and I don't want to be inflammatory, but market extremists. And I don't think they would disagree with that. But the word extremist is a little bit inflammatory, and I'm sorry for that, but I can't think of another word right now. But they are
Maybe market absolutists.
market absolutists. That's what I want to say. And I think, I've done work well before this campaign as to what I think the limitations on that are. And once again, I encourage any of your listeners to follow me on X and ask questions. I love talking about this stuff and fleshing out the theory of things. The difference between us and, say, People First Party. Look, I think Jared's actually a great operator. I'm friendly with him. I think he's a good guy, and I think he's a great politician. So I don't have anything negative to say about him, other than that this might be a good time to interject. I think that TOP and this circle, our circle, will deal with issues of culture and identity more than Senator Rennick will. And he's obviously a financial and economic gun, but he tends to focus a lot on the economics. And he even says himself, I went into politics to fix a tax issue that he thought was unjust, which is absolutely valuable. I think it's great. But I think we also have an issue. We deal with issues of culture and identity more than he does. This might be a good time to bring up, I did ask John to cut a clip in from Tucker Carlson.
When I was in Australia, the thing that shocked me the most was I think it's called a land acknowledgement. I found it one of the most grotesque things I've ever seen, one of the most profound humiliation rituals I've ever witnessed in my life. Every time a meeting opens, I think the school day begins this way. Every time a commercial airliner lands, you come in on Qantas, and they announce that the land that you're on does not belong to you. And I thought to myself, who is this helping? Is it helping the indigenous community? If so, tell me how. When you say this doesn't belong to me, is someone in the indigenous community getting a job or a government grant? No. No one is benefiting except the people who seek to steal your country. And they are going to steal your country, and they're telling you so. When you are forced to say something is not yours, that means someone else is about to take it from you. If you're sitting at home one night and an armed group of people show up at your house with guns and say, henceforth, we would like you to say out loud every single day, this is not our house. That's not your house. And you say, but I paid for this house. I've got a mortgage on it. It's my house. No. They stick a gun in your face. Every day you repeat, this is not my house. What do you think their intention is? Why do you think they're asking you to do that? They're asking you to do that so they can steal your house. And when they do steal your house, you won't put up a fight because you've been trained to believe it's not your house. That's exactly what a land acknowledgement is.
Now, this is an interesting clip that was going around about the welcome to country and it being what I've said for a long time, a bit of a psychological priming, a bit of a psychological undermining of the sense that we have a legitimate country and we have a legitimate claim to our country. So I'm not sure that people first deal with this stuff as much, but it is also very important to me. We've been honest in coming out and saying, where there's issues around the trans thing, trans identity, like we wish people well, but there have to be some limits if one person's freedom is overriding another's. So we've come out and said at the end of the day, we agree with what President Trump in the US has said, that there has to be a line in the sand that where there is sufficient conflict, we can rely on the end point being that there is actually just men and women at the end of the day. And, we should all live and let live, but where that's not happening, we need some decidability. And that's got to be that the reality is that there are men and women. I don't know if people first have dealt with that issue, but I find some of the issues around the trans thing and some of the degrees to which people have had to go to court to defend basic empirical reality a huge problem. I think it's absolutely intolerable that we depart from reality so much as a country. And I think it's indicative of much worse things that could happen if we go down that path of ignoring the evidence of our own eyes. So I don't know if people first or the libertarians have really dealt with that one. And once again, the Tucker Carlson thing, it was interesting when I saw that Tucker clip going around because, and this is all public knowledge now, I'm pretty sure I can talk about it. So I saw that presentation by Tucker 2 weeks ago at the Trumpet of Patriot's party launch when the presentation started. That was the first thing to come up. I think Senator Babbitt said, we've got a special message from Tucker Carlson, and it was about the 35-minute video. John hopefully has played the clip, the 1.5-minute clip, which is probably the main point, but you can also find under my Twitter or X, the 30-minute thing. And that was played for us 2 weeks ago. And you'll find that on that clip, the 30-minute clip, it doesn't start at the start. It's cut to start as Tucker's speaking. It almost starts mid-sentence. And that's because the start of it had been clipped out where he talked about touring Australia with Clive Palmer and the UNI-PARTY and how much he supports this thing. So the point being is that was a discrete presentation commissioned by Mr. Palmer and the party for the party. And I urge all your listeners to this to listen to that Tucker segment and see if the issues around identity resonate with you, because that was played for us exclusively. Now, that was actually leaked and is doing the rounds. We don't know how, but they're definitely looking into it. And sounds conspiratorial, but I'm telling you, as far as I understand the truth to be, it was made for the party and it got leaked. I think there's some action on people who've done that going to be undertaken. But the point being, Tucker himself talked about Australia and the US as Anglosphere countries. Now, that is an understanding of our identity that is rapidly being eroded for our population, that we have, a tie to Britain as, predominantly an Anglo-Celtic nation. And this isn't to exclude other people as well, because as a party and myself, we don't want to exclude other people that are Australian citizens. That's not what we're about. But we can also acknowledge the truth that we're founded as a British colony and that we have a lot of overlap with other Anglosphere countries. And Tucker also spoke about the Anglo spirit as well. That might be in the bit that's actually chopped out of the video doing the rounds, but on the presentation he talked about the Anglo spirit. And that goes to, I've talked about an Anglo-Celtic tradition. If we talk about these issues like the degree of market versus, redistribution and our commons and our institutions, what it really boils down to is preserving our Anglo-Celtic tradition. And so, look, what I'm trying to say is, separate to the libertarians, People First, and probably even One Nation, I think we've put out material and policies that reflect the identitarian issues as well. And that sits with me quite well because, as you know, I've been talking about that myself. So we're market focused and we've got all that under wraps as well, but we have another side that the other parties probably don't focus on as much.
And,
sorry for the long answer.
That's perfect. Here at the Nationals, we obviously commend that because there are very few organisations or people willing to come out in the public space and say, this is a country built on Anglo-Saxon and Celtic peoples, their history, their cultures, their religion, and that should be respected, not demonised, not put under the table like most other parties do. And now, with saying that,
can I ask you a question then? Can I ask you a question? So, with that in mind, why hasn't there been more support for our party? I mean, just in the spirit of knowing for next time and constructive feedback, why do you think, in your opinion, there could have been more support for our party from some of the people like your listenership or other sort of people that lurk around the minor right parties?
I think it's a tough position because the minor right sphere, for the older population, it's more goes into the larrikin kind of culture. This kind of I don't want to be too insulting, but this laid back Australianism. Whereas for younger people, it's more upper class in the sense of private school, higher education. So it's kind of, you're trying to get two different markets or two different voter bases, which are kind of in opposition outside of the identity issue. So it's kind of, and at least to me, Trumpet of Patriots kind of appeals more to the older demographic. Whereas there are, obviously there is outreach in terms of policy to younger people. It's more how it's presented, if that makes sense.
So you think it's a branding thing, like the name and the way it's presented?
Because to many young people, even those that agree with us, Clive, for all his benefits and his flaws, he kind of has a negative reputation among younger people. I'm not going to go out to a pub with mates and be like, oh yeah, I'm voting for Clive's party, because it has that stigma. And I'm not sure how, obviously, you as a candidate or as a party can kind of deal with that, because even the LNP kind of has that, and they're institutionalized, mainstream, get 35% or roughly around the primary vote. So it's a more broader issue around culture in Australia. Around, if you touch these issues, you're ostracized. If that helps at all.
Yeah, I think I noticed that too. I think once again it's a bit of a generational thing. The older generations will look at someone who's wealthy and say, good on them, and because they often have more wealth themselves, then they're more incentivized to think it's not a bad thing to be successful and wealthy because they're successful and wealthy.
Yeah.
Whereas, and that's what I talked about, the younger people are being hamstrung in a lot of ways and are feeling it. And so when they look at people who have wealth, there's a lot of that energy that can be sucked up into the Marxist narrative of like, well, you've got to just take it off them.
And
And
the young people that are, successful or come from wealthy families are,
yes,
in my opinion, or my experience at least, the least likely to be indoctrinated to Marxism. So that's kind of
yeah,
plays into that dichotomy between older and younger people who you guys can tap into.
yeah. See, I mean, the thing that's funny with me is I came from what you'd consider a very disadvantaged background, like extremely. But I've kind of worked my way up into a career and a family. So I have a different perspective on that. I definitely wasn't upper class private school either. But I have to say that when you do start from a disadvantaged background, yeah, it's not the norm that you grow up looking at someone like Clive Palmer and saying, well, he's just very successful.
Yeah.
And I won't shy away from saying that, people in his generation, there were structural issues that allowed them to be successful, and those structural issues have changed for this generation. But I mean, that's what drives me to do this, is I want to change the structural issues back to more what they used to be, where people were successful and could be successful, so in a way that like the Greens and the left, the Greens will say housing is a human right, say. Well, I don't agree that housing is a human right, but I agree that it is a right that should you be a responsible and normal person and you work an honest week's work, then you should be able to afford a house.
Yeah.
Which I think is a poignant distinction.
And I think more broadly with younger people, it is there's less of an ideological divide. Where you look at older Australians, the Liberal Party believe in free market ideology, whereas older Labor Party voters view in a command and control kind of market ideology. Whereas young people, it isn't so ideologically based. It's more around issues. So you can have a person one election vote Green, next Liberal, then One Nation. So there's more fluidity there, which is promising, I think, for parties like yours on the minor right. But I wonder, obviously outside of the Marxist extremists, but I wonder how that will change, obviously, into the future. If that will be funneled back into the major parties, or if we'll see a more multi-party system as we see across Europe. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I try not to pull out my crystal ball because it doesn't work very well.
No, fair enough. I'll pull out the crystal ball.
I just say that I do my best.
You do your best, yeah. I think, at least this is my wishful thinking, if the minor parties were larger, so Greens, Trumpet of Patriots, Libertarian, Family First, Jared Rennick, it would put more emphasis on the Liberal and Labor Party to present policies that are actually beneficial to younger voters, to actually go out and try and win new voters rather than resting on their existing voter base, which would be better for myself, for you, Rob, and for our listeners at home.
Yep.
So in the 22 election, we saw Senator Babbitt elected for Clive Palmer on the United Australia Party ticket down in Melbourne. Do you predict, or what's your understanding of what it's going to turn out this year? Are you seeing anything promising in terms of pre-polling data for the party?
I don't like making predictions.
Fair enough.
I don't know. I mean, if we have been looking at some of the ads, and there is a very vocal minority of people that express that they don't like what we're saying. But if you look at all the ads that we're running, they seem to be 80% likes.
Okay.
So I think there's an ad with myself, and it's something like out of 2,500 interactions, about 22. Sorry, 2,500. So 2,500 interactions. Clicks on the post. Reactions. I mean, about 2,200 is likes. Another one was with Sue Ellen. It was something like 4,500 likes to 5,500 interactions. And so who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. I have seen online there's been some pushback about the text message campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a lawyer, I don't know the legality of that, but it does seem a new avenue that is taken from the Americans, this type of SMS messaging out to the general voters. Do you think that will be successful, and will we see that beyond this election, or will that
It's
be
hard
kind
to
of,
say because 1 in a
yeah,
thousand people might be vocally against it, but it doesn't mean it's bad. Um, Look, party wise, it's my opinion that should have a, if you don't want to receive these, press reply with stop, and it should do that. However, I mean, I know that the law about this was set up by Labor and Liberal Party previous to this election, and they once again decided that they're above the law and that that political parties didn't have to. We're allowed to do that essentially. Like it is legal to do that. It's illegal for political parties to send you a text. And so I think the position from head office is like, well, the Labor Party don't have a unsubscribe option, so why do we need to? And it's almost like conceding defeat.
yeah,
However, my own personal preference for next time would be if you wish to not receive these, press stop. But then again, there are people as well out there, and I had these in 22. So you get a list of party members in your electorate, and you can call them, say, hi, my name's Rob, I'm your local candidate for the upcoming election. Would you like to come to a meet and volunteer, blah, blah, blah. And on the first call, there was like, once again, 1 in 1,000 people, but they say, oh, okay, I didn't consent to you having my contact. I'm going to sue you, see you in court, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, mate, the only way we've got your contact is because you entered it on the website yourself, but it's just an intimidation tactic as well, because it's trying to get you to freak out and be like, oh, I don't want to get sued. I better not call any more volunteers. I guess we should just have a Labor government forever, and that stuff absolutely happens. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say what the right thing to do is there. But as in all things, the final decider is the law, and the law says that it's perfectly legal and other parties are doing it too. So what can I say?
I think it is a bit refreshing because we do see in like campaign financing laws as well a preference to Labor and Liberal. So it is good to see a party like yours bending the rules or whatever you want to call it the same way that they are to point out the flaws in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And also, one thing I want to touch on was around preferencing this election. We see you guys preferencing Labor over Liberal, which is a break in tradition for you guys. Do you want to elaborate why that is?
Yeah, so we have gone. There was obviously a controversy. Happy to talk about it. So I always try to tell the truth as much as I know it. And so the first thing I have to say is I didn't do the cards, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
I'm the second on the Senate ticket for Queensland. I'm a candidate, but I'm not in head office, and I don't make those decisions, so I don't know. Having said that, I think it's good to keep in mind there's 151 electorates plus senates. So we're talking about nearly 160 how to vote cards, and there was controversy over about 3 or 4 of them. I don't think that's a huge deal. But one of the ones I did see was Griffith, and the logic behind it immediately stood out to me in the seat of Griffith, because if you look at the primary votes, I ran in Griffith in 22 against Max Chandler Mather, and the Greens got such a huge percentage of the primary vote, they easily won. So I think the reality of the seat of Griffith is that that seat is going to either be Labor or Green. And Max Chandler Mather, the Green, is the sitting member currently now. So we did have a policy of trying to unseat the sitting members, the current members. And so with that in mind, I wouldn't be surprised if, given that Labor or Green are the only two possible options, the best of a bad bunch, so to speak, would be to remove the sitting member, and it'd have to be Labor. So then that was probably the thinking in my mind there. So I mean, you could put Labor Green last, and minor parties are Liberal. But if that arranged the preferences in such a way as to get more to the Greens, then we may have inadvertently helped the Green member get re-elected, and that would be counter to what we wanted to do. So that's my speculation on the logic. However, I will say there was feedback, and how to vote cards have been reissued. So don't discount the value of positive, constructive criticism and pointing things out. I mean, obviously the party wants to stay true to its values and have those reflected in everything it does. Like I've always said about this group of people, and I've run with them again because I do think they are genuine. I think that what they say is what they think, and they think what they say, So, yeah, so I mean, there's a few things like that. And another thought I had was, there was an issue about a Teals candidate. The reality might be that specific Teals candidate was just insignificant. And, according to the primary votes, who knows? That was my thinking. I don't think it was as big a deal as it was made out to be. And I think that at the end of the day, the party has reissued according to its values. We do want to put sitting members last. We want to put the Liberal Labor last. And I mean, it's also another dishonest tactic to say we're preferencing Labor because, and I made this point once again on X today again, you should all follow me on X, that we often in all our advertising reference the UNI-PARTY. That's one of the problems that we see, is that the Liberal Party is a fake opposition. They softball and go soft, and they just, after COVID, I mean, the Liberal Party had control of the federal government, and it was a massive failure according to their stated values of individual freedom, etc. And in a lot of ways, a lot of legislation we could talk about, they fail, and they help that whole project of funneling our nation into global serfdom, for want of a better phrase. They help that along just as well. So we do want to get rid of the Liberal Party. And so people might say, oh, you're preferencing Labor above Liberal. Well, maybe that's because we want to punish the Liberal Party. And I'm okay with that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that needs to happen because I think we have a fake conservative, we have a fake right wing in this country. And all our advertising says that. They're two wings of the same bird, Tweedledee, Tweedledum, B1, B2. Clive said those repeatedly. So it is dishonest to say that we preference the Labor Party when we might just be trying to punish the Liberal Party, because we think they both need to go.
Fair enough. I was on the website here. I was checking out Peter Dutton's electorate, and it seems you guys put him last, which is kind of funny. But on a more serious note, I think John and I would disagree slightly in that we see within the Liberal Party there is a internal division between more progressive and more right-wing conservative forces. And if you were to attack someone like Peter Dutton, who we're the first ones to admit he's not great. He could be a lot better. He was a lot better in the past. But if we are, minor parties, and we're supporting minor parties, and we're telling people to follow the how to vote cards from minor parties, and it ends up unseating more conservative members of the Liberal Party than moderate, it kind of makes the problem worse. And so I want to talk about whether or not Trumpet of Patriot sees themselves as trying to outright destroy the major parties or try and push them in the right direction. Kind of, what's your approach on that? Because if there is a way you guys could influence the Liberal Party through, hey, if behind the scenes, hey, if you do this policy which we really like, and if you give it some support, we'll change our preferences towards you. Or is it more of a just stand on principle? We don't like them. We're doing this.
I think it's a principled thing. I mean, the reality is that if Clive Palmer wanted to fund the Liberal Party, they'd give him anything he wanted.
We've seen. I don't want to speak too much on the topic, but when Deb Frecklington was running against Anastasia Palaszczuk during COVID, Deb Frecklington spent election night on Clive Palmer's yacht, I'm pretty sure. That's what I've heard through the grapevine. So he has a long history with the Liberal Party.
I'm sure
I don't know personally.
I'm sure he does. I mean, he used to run the Queensland government with Joh
Yeah.
Bjelke-Petersen of the National Party. So, I mean, yeah, I'm sure he could walk into any office in the Liberal Party himself, like whenever he felt like it. But that's what I mean. If he wanted the Liberal Party to do something, I'm sure he could make it happen.
But then that brings up the question, why have the Trumpet of Patriots if he could have that influence over the Liberal Party?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe he can't.
Because at least from my understanding, it's
I mean, look, I'm just going to phrase this in another way. So, I
yeah,
mean, people throw this at me all the time. I've got half the people say to me, "Go and vote in the Liberal Party and take it over."
yeah.
I mean, so I know that Clive could throw money at them, but I don't know if that would change the voting. You know what I mean? I don't know if that
I
would change
understand,
the
yeah,
voting of the Liberal Party. So people say to me, like say with Jared Rennick's pre-selection, he was close to being voted voted back in, and he missed out by a handful of votes. And so like the people said to me, well, why don't you just go and overtake the Liberal Party? But on the other hand, I've got other friends who are banned from the Liberal Party because they know that they might tackle some of the issues that we tackle. Sorry, I just don't know what that sound is. So I think one of the things that's intolerable to me, apart from that sound, is I once again say the biological men and women thing. If the Liberal Party is going to throw people out for broaching that, then it's a dead end. And so, yeah, I'm not really sure about that one. I'll have to have a think about it. I don't know if he could get his way on policy or voting. You know what I mean? I don't know if that would be the deal. I'll have to have a think about that. I'm not really sure. If he ideologically, because I know that Dutton is friendly with Gina Reinhardt, so this is so speculative. I'm not really sure. Does she get to call the shots on policy? Does she get to tell Dutton what's acceptable to say and what not to say? Could Clive do that if he funded them? I don't know. But
to me, it seems that he would be able to influence the part of the party, like Susan McDonald, like Jerry Rennick when he was back in there, the more right-wing side of the party who are more open to mining as an industry. But he will struggle with the more moderate part of the party who represent, inner suburban seats who may not toe the line with him as much. So maybe that is kind of the main
So look,
issue.
I mean, look at the more redeeming thing with the Liberal Party in Victoria. Apparently, and this once again, the people told me the Liberal Party in Victoria is extremely woke and has been taken over. And so other friends of mine who have been members of the Liberal Party say that they've been taken over by the left. And so, I mean, could he waltz in there and tell them what to do on that degree? I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. But once again, this gets into the crystal ball stuff. I'm not really sure. I think because I put myself out there, would I be banned from the Liberal Party? I'm not sure. But look, this comes down to, and we've been dealing with this for years, is that everybody's got strong opinions on what to do.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, like I said, I don't like using my crystal ball because it doesn't work very well. And I think that nobody's crystal ball works very well. And I don't think any of us has the exact answers. It's instead of like the silver bullet strategy, just do this one thing and it's going to work. I don't think anybody knows that. So what I try to think of it as is a field of possible strategies, and we all try what we want to do, and we all pursue opportunities as they present themselves. And then when we start to get returns on those strategies, we focus on that more. So it's more of a field of possibilities. And I get back to why I ran with TOP this time is that my dealings with the group of people have been very genuine, hanging out with people like Senator Babette and Sue Ellen, and all my dealings with Clive personally. He's always treated me with a lot of respect. And I think the policies make sense. So I don't get any feeling of any ulterior motive there So I take it as it comes, and it seems to be what it seems to be on the surface to me. That's my read of the situation. In terms of taking over the Liberal Party, I don't know. But you know what? If one of your listeners feels like it's a good idea, absolutely go do it. I mean, after the election, I said I promised to one of my friends that I would have a good think about it.
I think John and I have always been open to our listeners of if you want to join the Liberal Party and help out there, you can do that. If you want to join Libertarian, you guys, One Nation, Family First, any other smaller party, we're open to that. And we are, I think that approach of not thinking, oh, I'm such a smart guy, this strategy is going to work, I'm going to have to tell everyone, and just sitting there and watching how the field plays is definitely the way to go. I think I talked to one of our friends over in Germany, George.
Also just say too, like you guys know me, I've got a lot to say as well. And so I'm also happy to put my stuff that I do between elections out there as well. And it's a great vehicle for that, for my own profile as well. Which I think is, very supplementary to the party as well. I can defend the policies from a theoretical point of view more than most. But that's the other thing too, is you also have to remember you can't waste your vote. If if someone listening wants the Liberal Party back in, then put them second. Like if you want to send a signal that you're not happy with the Liberal Party, if you put them first, you're sending a signal to them, okay, I'm totally happy, don't change anything. But if you feel like they do need to change something, then put your minor parties first. You could put myself, Libertarians, People First, and then the Liberal Party. And so you're in a win-win situation then. So someone like us who's probably pushing the edge a bit more than the Liberal Party candidate would, we get in, well, that's great. But if we don't, we get eliminated, then your vote becomes a vote for the Liberal Party. So it's like a win-win anyway. If that's how your listeners feel that they would at the end of the day prefer the Liberal Party back in, then vote that way.
So you can protest with your first preference, then
Absolutely.
not have to worry about your protest screwing you over with Labor getting in if that's the worst in your situation.
So if we get eliminated, so say you vote myself, Jared Rennick, Libertarian candidate number one, and then your Liberal Party candidate, if we all get eliminated, your vote becomes then a vote for the Liberal Party because it goes down the preference list. So you can't waste it. It's a no-win situation. Sorry, it's a no-lose situation.
Yeah. And I think to wrap it all up, it's been a very great discussion having you on, Rob, and we'll put all your links down below for anyone who wants to follow you on X, any other social medias you want to send us through. Go down there, and the people who haven't voted, who've listened, consider Rob, if you're in the state of Queensland, putting him below the line if you do that, or above the line with the party. But I reflect on this discussion around strategy and policy and with the approach we should do towards getting our ends in politics. A couple of months ago, I was talking to our friend George in Germany who works with the AfD, and what they found really successful was establishing organizations outside of politics, like think tanks and networks of people to discuss politics and ideas outside of just election season. So you have the refinement of ideas, and you have this seeing what works, what doesn't before the election, so you can come to the election with a refined policy platform, with a refined messaging approach, all that kind of stuff. And they've seen it work really well over in Germany. And I think regardless of, if you want to join the Liberal Party or you want to vote for Rob or for Jared Rennick or for Lachlan Libertarians, we all can come together and try and help build this ecosystem where these ideas or these topics can be discussed outside of elections, and we can, sharpen steel, refine the best possible ideas to bring in for future elections.
I just want to go through that thing because I feel like I thought myself into a corner, and I don't want to fuel the opinions that there's something else going on. I mean, I always try to be authentic and honest. I mean, that's I think what I try to do all the time is I just try to be honest. And I just want to quickly think through. I mean, the way I think is like a flow chart, if this, then that, So, I mean, if we're worried about the direction, see, when I look at the party and all the discussions we have on the inside, it is worried about the direction of the country. And I do urge you once again to watch the 30-minute clip by Tucker Carlson, because it is a good overview, and that was presented by the Trumpet of Patriot. So that is a good summary of how we see the issues facing us. So if that's the case, and I don't have any reason to think it's not, could Clive influence the Liberal Party to that degree, or would he just get booted? I mean, in terms of Deb Franklington, I mean, that was, how long was Palaszczuk in for? 6 years? Was that 6 years
Yeah, I
ago?
think maybe eight.
8.
Oh, 6 years ago, but she was in for 2 terms or maybe 3 terms. No, it would have been
Yeah.
2 terms.
So, I mean, that's a long time ago
Yeah.
in terms of being friendly with Deb Franklington? Sorry, Deb. But that's a long time ago. A lot of things have changed. And I think the COVID response really changed a lot of people's minds about the Liberal Party. And I think that's where a lot of this, they're both the same, started. So it wouldn't surprise me if Clive's relationship with the Liberal Party soured after that.
That's perfectly
Yeah.
reasonable, I think, on how he's
Yeah.
positioned himself, the topics, the issues he's been talking about.
Yeah, look, I especially people in the Gold Coast, like business leaders and stuff that I was talking to around pre-COVID before I signed up with UAP, there were a lot of successful, wealthy people that weren't happy with the jab mandates and that sort of thing. And I think there would have been these in previously easily Liberal seats, and they were all turning on the Liberal Party because of how they acted. So, yeah, I have to say, I mean, I know that with the Palmer United Party back in the day, he was quite successful around the 2013, 14 or something. But we are going back a bit if we're going to talk about that. So I guess probably it seems to me the most reasonable answer to that is that things have just changed since the COVID response, and the Liberal Party's changed since then as well.
I think that's for sure. Some ways for the better, some ways for the worse, and the effect of which will remain to be seen on election night. Thank you, Rob,
Yeah,
for joining
absolutely.
us.
My pleasure.
All the best. And again, if anyone wants to follow him, link will be down below. All the best, everyone. Have a good week.